Raj, we're gonna go with you first, just in case you might have to leave a little early. Um, first, also, you'll tell it through your story, but just kind of your role as getting into National Lampoons and you being the owner. I can't wait to hear this story, and we're gonna have a good time with it. So, world famous question coming straight to you: how did you get to the seat that you're sitting in today? Please give us Star Wars Episode 1, 2, and 3. You said you like to ramble on, and we're ready to listen.
I love it. I love it. We were always taught when we were in college and coming out, you keep your answers concise for the interviews, but it's you guys are here facilitating or hopefully what is an interesting conversation. So I guess it's therapeutic to share more than less. Uh, well, Yogi and I actually, I'll speak for him for a little bit for a second. We're first cousins, and we both grew
That's
up.
right. I remember you saying
Yeah,
that.
That's cool.
yeah, we grew up across the street from each other. We're 6 years apart, and our his mother and my father are brother sister, and all of their siblings moved over time from India to that street, basically. So we were two of I think 14 or 15 cousins that all grew up together,
Yep.
That's cool.
and yeah, so. I was born in Minneapolis, suburb of it, and grew up there and went to, basically K through 12 at Edina in the Edina school system,
Hmm.
and growing up, and you guys probably know that Bollywood is a huge
Mm-hmm.
sort of it has more influence than even Hollywood does here
Hmm.
in the States.
Yep.
Uh, we grew up seeing virtually everything because our parents would go and rent the video cassettes from the local Indian store, and so that was kind of
Nice.
when I think back, yeah, that was like my first exposure to just cinema and storytelling, and at the same time we're watching cartoons and all the stuff that was on TV, TGIF, all that stuff that was on back then. Yeah.
TGIF, man. I haven't heard that in ages. I love that you brought
Right?
that up, man.
Yeah, the downfall of broadcast means we don't get to watch that anymore.
I
I don't know when they
know.
did away with it, but that was the thing. So yeah, grew up in Edina, Minnesota. We actually Yogi still has long hair, but I don't. We were raised Sikh, and that's interesting because we're the only brown kids in this mostly white school system, which was all good, but we just stood
Right.
out like sore thumbs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that kind of was formative because you're trying to assimilate, but at the same time try to preserve your identity and culture.
Hmm.
And when I look back, I think humor was a big part of that because it's so universal. And I would chalk up being well liked to having a pretty good sense of humor, and it was a nice icebreaker anywhere I went or anybody I met. So
Hmm.
um, making friends and all of that was actually it came kind of natural to me. Then I went to the University of Minnesota, so I stayed local, as I mentioned, Big Ten, and our family is a family of entrepreneurs. They all studied some domain or expertise, but ended up going into various businesses. And I think when I originally set out to go to school, I thought I'd be maybe a part of one of them coming out. Uh, but this was in the early 2000s, and the economy was firing, and tech and Wall Street and consulting. There were like a handful of areas, marketing and PR, where the jobs out of college were highly coveted, and I just took a real interest in finance in college, and so I ended up majoring in that, and the place to go was Wall Street. They didn't recruit at the University of Minnesota, so then it turned into a thing of how do I kind of finagle my way in where we're not a core school that they come to, and so I interned at this private equity fund one
Hmm.
summer between my second and third years of school. I graduated in 3 years. I had a bunch of AP credits, and I think that
Oh,
helps sell my
nice.
story. Yeah. Um, and the guy I worked for basically said, "Look, I can't pay you, but I'll help you get a job out there." And he made good on that. So he introduced me to all his pals from business school,
Yeah.
and I just did that whole thing where I kind of back channeled into some banks to get interviews, and ended up starting out at Merrill Lynch when
Nice.
it was still around. And actually, Maddie, there were quite a few. I think Penn State either happened to be a target school for them, or they just had a big alumni presence, because I know several people that had gone to
Mm,
Penn State and were at Merrill. So there's some kind of, they had a good tie to Wall Street,
got
which
it.
is nice.
Yeah.
Um, After Merrill, I left, and remember, this is after Batman Begins. So I'm in Merrill Lynch. I'm doing industrials investment banking, which is companies in like old economy sectors like manufacturing,
Uh-huh.
auto, construction, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, After that, I went to this private equity fund called Greenbrier Equity Group, which
Okay.
they do buyouts of companies in the transportation sector. So, again, not media, not entertainment, but uh, another area or industries I felt would be interesting to learn about. Uh, After that, I came to this crossroads where I wasn't. It didn't the sort of like the fulfillment wasn't there, and I felt like I had a good handle on how that world works. So I thought I would give it one more shot and try to go to an investment company that had the broadest mandate possible. Because if I could invest in anything, so long as it made sense, and I still didn't like it, then I should just leave and try to get a job in LA working at a studio or something.
Hmm.
And in the first 3 months of that job, I took it. So I ended up going back to Minneapolis, joined this credit hedge fund, and they invested everywhere as long as it was like the risk reward profile was attractive.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't matter what industry, what geography, nothing like that. They did everything from they bought hard assets um, like wind turbines, to bought companies, to bought stock, to it just ran the gamut. So 3 months into that, I was in LA visiting some friends socially, and I met who's now been my partner for 11 years, a guy named Kevin Frakes.
Okay.
And yeah, Kevin was running a film production and finance company called Palm Star. It's still there, and we built it up from where it was. And we came up with a plan, just kind of like over beers, on how my fund could team up with him to actually go and produce and finance independent films. And the rest is sort of history. So we ended up, it took 6 months to get that platform up and running. And then we made around 15 movies together uh, in the time that I was still at the investment fund. And then I left and joined him. And at this point, IP was becoming a thing. It was becoming like a phrase in the vernacular. It was thrown around loosely, and it still is today, even more so. But the idea of
Hmm.
finding something that is real intellectual property, that has awareness, there's value to what it is. That's kind of um, uh, uh, like fundamental, and uh,
Yeah.
and then trying to find things that are off market or have some hair or dirt or complexity around them.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the same year, we had two opportunities that came up. One we just aggressively pursued. Kevin's favorite book is The Alchemist. You guys read that?
I
Do you
have
know it?
heard of it, but I have
Yeah.
not
I've read
read
it.
it.
Okay, so it is it's a global bestseller. Like, we're
Right.
talking over 100 million copies sold, and it, I think at this point, is the best-selling unproduced book of all time. Everything else that sold more copies than it has been made into a movie.
Wow.
And
Mm,
yeah, it's a really great story. It's a metaphor for life, essentially, but it's told through the lens of this shepherd in Spain who goes to Egypt to find a treasure. And essentially, there are many gists of it, but the gist of the story is basically, what you learn along the journey is more valuable than the outcome, even if you
Right.
get the outcome right. And there are many
mm,
other teachings in it, but um, that was one. And we just, it was so meaningful to so many people around the world, and it hadn't been made, and there was a lot of complexity around it, but over time we've kind of cleaned it up and figured it out, and we took over that. And then the other was National Lampoon.
Right.
We had produced 3 or 4 comedy films by that point, really loved it, and wanted to find a more systematic uh, or institutionalized way to do it instead of doing it in one-offs. And we looked around the entertainment business and didn't really see anything where we could say, hey, what, that's a good example of how this should be.